Welcome to the Agency Initiative podcast hosted by Kristen Cavanaugh and Mike Randolph. Authentic people, courageous stories. This podcast is sponsored by the Agency Initiative with the intention of building agency for the moments that matter. For more information about the Agency Initiative and to start your journey, check out www.agency-initiative.com. Welcome to the Agency Initiative podcast, where we celebrate authentic people and courageous stories. If you've been with us since season 1, you know we explored a range of topics around leadership and personal development. Now in season 2, we're excited to bring you the agency sessions. This season is designed in preparation for a special project which we've been working on, and we'll share more about that soon. We'll revisit some of the key ideas in season 1, enriched by insights and experiences we've gained over the past year while working closely with our clients. Today, I'm here with Kristen Cavanaugh. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you again.
All right. It's good to have you back, Kristen. Today, we kick off our new series with the fundamental question, what is courage? In a world where leaders are constantly faced with tough decisions and unforeseen challenges, courage is often what separates effective leadership from mere management. We'll explore what courage means, discuss why we believe it's foundational to authentic and impactful leadership, and lay the groundwork for our evolving leadership philosophy. So, Kristen, let's get started. What does courage mean in the context of leadership to you?
You know, I think this seems like a simple question, but it's actually quite difficult to answer.
Okay.
So I think at its most basic level, to me, courage means doing the right thing even when it's hard. And that's a lot. It's a lot harder than it seems. But I think that's what it comes down to for me is you're faced with a situation, whether that's in the workplace or in my case, you know, as being a brain, where you are at an impasse and there's an easy path. But then there's the courageous path that might be more strained. It might take longer. It might involve, danger, but like courage is having the ability to navigate and be willing to step into that more difficult path where others may take a different approach.
It's interesting because, we expect leaders to have courage. We expect leaders to just innately be ready to handle the hard conversations. But that takes practice. That takes time.
Right.
And that's not something that's necessarily easy for leaders to do just off the bat. Hey, I'm going to wake up today and be as courageous as possible.
No, not at all. And I think until maybe you're tested or until you find yourself in that situation, you can assume that you're going to be courageous, but you don't know until you're standing there at the precipice of this moment what you're actually going to do.
Well, and when we talk about courage too, it's about overcoming an obstacle. A lot of times it's about overcoming an internal obstacle with that as well. Some emotion or something that you have that is getting in your way of being what you think is the right type of leader in that moment, or taking the right action, or taking the action that's needed to be done in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fundamental to what we think and why courage is a part of this philosophy. It isn't just external. It isn't just the actions you take. You say this all the time. Sometimes being courageous is inaction. And so I think a huge part of being courageous is that internal component and how you show up courageously, or how, we'll talk about this later, but how you be courageous. And that's the more difficult way, I think, of being, or to show courage than just in your actions. It's who you are. How do you naturally show up as a courageous person, that people really don't think about it in those terms.
So then why is courage so foundational or fundamental in our philosophy on leadership, or the way we look at leadership? I
think it's the underpinning of everything that we do and everything that we talk about. For someone to be authentic, they have to have the courage to be themselves and be who they are, and understand their values and understand their identities, and feel comfortable with that, with those things. And that takes courage. I think when it comes to agency and making decisions in really critical moments, you have to have the courage to be able to do what's right in a moment of hardship. And I think to grow, you have to have the courage to grow when you're wrong, and to grow from experiences when you're right. And so it really is the underpinning of everything that we're talking about. And I think the more people can get wrapped around and get buy-in to learning how to be courageous and learning how to find that courage inside themselves, then things like authenticity and agency and growth become a little bit easier because it's all underpinned in courage.
When we were talking just a minute ago, or when you were sharing your initial thoughts a minute ago, we started to play off this idea of overcoming something. So a leader has to overcome something. They have to have the courage to overcome something, whether that's internal or external. For the internal pieces, like what are some of those barriers that people run up against when they're not, or they're deciding have that moment of pause, say, I got to be courageous in this moment. Like what are some of those, maybe emotions or like the thoughts that they're overcoming?
I think a lot of it is fear.
Okay.
When we talk a lot about how much fear there is in the system right now. That could be internally, that could be externally. But I think there are a lot of things that people can be insecure about or can be anxious about or can be nervous about. But all that comes back to a basic sense of fear and how to overcome things that maybe they haven't experienced before or maybe could have some grave consequences. And so it really is starting to understand and get to know those fears and then be able to make choices in the face of things that can be scary. That could be in the workplace, that could be at home. Like there are a lot of things that can cause those anxieties.
Yeah, and it's the experiences, I think, that play into that too, where leaders who are new or leaders who haven't run into a situation before, those emotions come up because they haven't had that opportunity to experience that. Not just the emotion of it, but to really practice setting those emotions aside, setting those feelings aside and saying, cool, I acknowledge that, but I have to do something with this now. And that's where I think a lot of our philosophy is also helping leaders get there faster. Right.
And how do you do that? A lot of people don't willingly put themselves in situations where they're going to be afraid.
Right.
Like
that seems against human nature.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I'm not going to go pick up a snake because, no, thank you. And I think to your point, leaders aren't in these situations every day, and it's really hard, even in fantastic workshops like our own, right? Like to manufacture a real sense of fear to help people see how they're going to show up in those moments. Like you really just don't know until it happens. And so I think the more we can talk about it and understand it and bring it to the forefront of somebody's conscience that is something that is going to happen and they need to be prepared in that moment, then they can have a better reaction or a measured reaction or intentional, I think that's the way we talk about it, reaction in those moments.
Well, let's dive into another point then. Like, what's the difference between courage and confidence? You might be confident to do something like that if you've experienced it in the past, but I'm curious.
Yes.
There you go. Like,
nailed it.
Okay.
You nailed it.
Okay.
So the way that I think about confidence comes from past experiences. So confidence is born in the past. When I think of courage, that feels forward-looking to me. So it's something that hasn't happened yet, but I am prepared for and willing to kind of walk through that hard moment. But I really think confidence comes from just the knowledge and the understanding of doing something, experiencing, feeling something in the past. And I don't think that... I think they maybe go hand in hand, right? But I think courage has to be forward looking and rooted in the future.
Okay. Can you use confidence to be courageous in a moment? Like, again, say maybe you've experienced something similar or something like that, but it doesn't have to, they're not mutually exclusive in that sense.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you can be confident without being courageous.
Okay. Say more about that. I'm curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think about, we're really into baseball right now.
Okay.
And so my son Wesley is very confident about his baseball skills. But he isn't going to go in and face a Major League Baseball pitcher, right? Like he does not have the courage to go do that, but he will tell you that he is the best baseball player in the world. And that may be a silly example, but I think like folks can be very confident about something, but they don't know until something happens exactly how they're going to react or not react. And so I think one might be I don't know, I was going to say a mindset, but I don't know that it's true. I think I'll leave it there, that people can be confident about something, but not have courage when a situation presents itself.
Okay.
I'm curious, like, what do you think? Like, do you agree?
I do agree. I think there's a timing element for courage. Like, courage is not something that I think that you explicitly maintain over time. It's not like it's like all emotions. Honestly, like all emotions you experience in the moment of that something is happening to you, you're experiencing something that, again, I think that there's an element where you have to summon courage in those moments, but it's not constant. It doesn't have to be. Whereas confidence, I think, could be more of a constant. I have confidence that I'm able to set up a podcast because I've done it in the past, and I know I could do that again. That's something like I picked up the equipment this morning and put it all together, and here we are. But did I have courage to read the podcast script? As I was like, okay, so that's something I had to summon in that moment to get in the right mindset to find. So I think that there's a timing element to courage as well, and it's difficult for leaders because they're called into those situations time and time again, even on a daily basis. And that can be, it's difficult for them to find the courage in those moments, but also then to be able to maintain that over the course of a day, a week, a month, whatever that is.
Yeah. I think something else too, Vanessa, my coach, who is phenomenal, and I've talked about this a lot, and I think Brene Brown talks about it too, courage being a heart word. So courage comes from the heart, where I think confidence feels like more of a head word, right?
Okay.
Like that, like I can think my way. I can think my way to be confident about something, but courage really comes from the heart, and that's a whole different experience.
Well, we've written about this in the past, where courage, the origin of the word is from the heart, right? And so when we talk about this, like, you really have to care about the people that you're working with, especially when you're talking about being a leader and having courage in those moments to do what is right. But it's that care piece and that heart piece that really come forward in courage, because that's really where the word comes from. Okay, so we've set the stage for what we're talking about today by defining what courage means in leadership. I want to take a closer look at how we actively cultivate it. In our work, we found that courage isn't just the bold actions we take. It's also about how we align those actions to our core identity. This brings us to our concept of courage through doing and being, a principle we arrived at through our understanding of cognitive behavioral therapy and Robert Ellis's triple loop learning. By focusing not only on what we do, but also on who we are, we can align our actions to our values, leading more authentically and effectively. This dual focus helps us navigate the complexities of leadership with both confidence and integrity. Let's dive into how these two elements, doing and being, interact to shape courageous leadership, and how we can apply these understandings to our own leadership journeys. All right, but first, like, Kristen, I need you to help me with this, okay? What is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and why does it matter in this context?
It's a great question. And I'm leaning on my social work
Please do.
background
Yes.
here. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a modality of therapy that really connects the mind and body. So your thoughts with your actions. And so why we think that is important here is because, as we talked about earlier, it's a lot of the thoughts that get in the way of the actions. And that can be thoughts about external factors, or that can be thoughts internally, right? Like that people might have insecurities about their ability to be courageous, or insecurities or anxieties around, about who they are and how they can show up in these situations. And so we really do think that courage is about connecting those thoughts and those actions to have better outcomes. And then that's where Robert Ellis's work comes in too. I was going to ask, yeah. Yeah, that's where the work comes in too. What he says is you have to think and then do and then be, right? And I may have it backwards. Maybe do, think, and I think it is think, do, and be, right? And so it is continuously making sure that it's not just about what you're thinking, but how that's connected to the actions you take, and then how that's connected to who you are at your core, right? So who are you being in that moment? And again, I go back to Vanessa. She asks me this all the time, like, who were you being when fill in the blank, or who do you want to be when? And so, I think the combination of those two things, like how we're thinking about people's actions, how we are helping them connect their thoughts, but ultimately helping them decide who they want to be as a leader, as a courageous leader, that is really the difference and where, I don't know, that sets us apart, I guess, in how we think about courageous leadership. We want people to be courageous. And how can we help them be courageous in these moments that we know that they're going to face?
Well, for me, CBT, when I've experienced this in my own therapy sessions, what my understanding of it is, like, again, we lay the foundation of courage being rooted as the experience, or in the moments where you're overcoming an obstacle, where you're overcoming fear. And CBT is all about understanding, the triggers for emotions, why those emotions come up, but then also understanding how you're going to deal with that. And so really courageous leadership, if in the context of CBT, for me means that, like, I'm going to recognize that there's an emotion, but I'm also going to make an intentional choice of what I'm going to do with that emotion in that moment. And I'm going to choose that courageous path, whatever that is, because that's something that I aligned my identity with.
Yep.
My identity is going to be a courageous leader. I'm going to choose that as going to be part of who I want to be, how I want to show up as a leader. And so it's that active choice in those moments and recognizing the emotions, recognizing when you're going to have to call on your courage, as it were, to then say, cool, I'm going to make this choice based on that feeling or that experience that I've had.
Yes.
One thing that's interesting with this too is that, I just said that it's about overcoming fear in that moment, but what happens if you don't take action? Because you have to have courage sometimes in those moments not to take action too, because maybe that's the courageous outcome, or that's maybe not the courageous outcome, but the smart outcome. Right.
Yes, showing restraint can be courageous, and I think that's where a lot of people don't make that connection, or don't recognize that doing nothing can also be courageous. And so when you think about what are you doing that is courageous, there's a whole spectrum of things that can look and sound differently, but be courageous in certain situations, right? And I think you're right. Like, there sometimes where the risks are too high, that the courageous thing is to really just shut up and say nothing. And I'm thinking back to my time in the Marine Corps, right? Like, just shut up and say nothing. And that is actually the courageous path, because it lets you live another day, to lead.
I think that's interesting too, because you said, there's, I can't remember exactly what you said now, but there's the outward appearance of courage being like of taking the action, of saying the thing, but like, what happens when you are observing that? What happens when you're in the passenger seat for that conversation, and that doesn't look like courage? It's the opposite of that. It's actually, I don't know what the right, but it shows up as like, wow, that guy is actually showing up as
a coward.
Okay, fair. Like, let's explore that. So that guy's showing up as a coward. What does that mean to show up as a coward, and still outward, maybe having the outward perception of like that person is trying to be courageous? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, and we're gonna have to talk about this, is that perspective gap, right? I think that applies here. I think back to some of our time at Tesla, and things that I did to further the team or further our organization that probably didn't look courageous from the outside, right? But what it allowed me to do was live another day and try again, right? And so I think, and if I'm learning and growing from that experience, I think transparency probably would have helped a little bit, right? To help people not justify actions or anything like that, but I think helping people understand some of the why behind decisions, and that might give some insight into like, okay, no, that wasn't a cowardly decision. That was like a strategic
Yeah.
decision, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's a big piece of it. Things that might look like, I think about my time in the Marine Corps, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, stand up and say something, like be out, be loud and proud. Well, no, you know, sometimes like being quiet and being strategic about when you use your voice and when you make certain choices, that's actually the long-term play.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so I think some of it comes down to transparency, but a lot of it comes down to strategy and knowing why you're making these decisions for what impact.
Yeah. Well, we look at some of the loud leaders as, you know, maybe not the, again, looking at the idea of this outward courage or this outward personification of courage that we see in like leaders that are held to a certain regard. And I don't like, there's this element where, you know, being the loudest leader in the room is not courage. Being
Right.
the most, I don't know what the right word is for this, but being that leader where, you know, I have the loudest voice in the room, or I my point of view, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
that isn't courage. That is something else
Right.
entirely, and that's not what we're telling people to do. With
Absolutely. No, we're going to talk about this on the next episode. I am going to go all in and deep on this one because I have very strong beliefs that you don't have to be the loudest. You
Yeah.
don't have to talk the most. You don't have to be the first to have an opinion. And you don't have to tweet everything that you believe. Like I have
Spoiler
very,
alert.
very strong opinions about this. And we have to help people understand that that's not courage.
Mm-hmm.
Courage looks differently for different people, and people have to find their unique way of showing up courageously. You know, when we were talking to the kids over at Princeton, I was using my Marine Corps story and kind of setting them up to think like, oh yeah, you're a Marine, you're in war, like you're in combat, like that's what courage is. But courage is actually like showing that restraint and being silent and like in it for the long term. And I think the more people we can get to recognize that you don't have to be the loudest, you don't have to be the first, you don't have to comment on everything. That's how you show true courageous leadership.
Yeah,
the better.
And we'll get into some of that and diving further into like how you understand different perspectives and how like what that looks like versus, you know, having your opinion be the loudest, having your voice be there. And I think there's an element too of courage to admit that you don't know.
Yes.
Admit that there is a gap, that perspective gap that we were talking about, and try to explore that. So we're definitely going to get into that in another session. So we're going to do this new thing for our podcast, and we want to add some dynamic back and forth discussion and explore some different perspectives. So Kristen and I are very different people, which is part of what makes our partnership really work. In this segment, we'll tackle a provocative question related to our topic. And each minute, we'll each take a minute to present our viewpoint. So you're going to get a lot of discourse and discussion as part of this flash segment that we're calling it, this Flashpoint debate. So,
and I just want to be clear, like we don't know who's getting what. Like we are really just going to debate this thing and come up with our
have
arguments.
at it. Yes. Yeah, we're going to have at it and then see where this takes us. So for our Flashpoint debate for this episode in defining courage, we're going to take a look at the concept of courage being innate or learned. Which side do you want?
I'm going to take learned.
Learned?
Yes.
Yeah, she gets the easy one. Okay.
No, I get the hard one.
Learned?
Yes.
No.
Absolute. See, debate on.
All right,
Let's
here we go.
Okay, so this is why I think courage can be learned. I
Okay.
think every person can be a leader.
Yep.
And so even people who aren't in leadership positions, people who don't have leadership titles, I think there are ways that people can step up and lead themselves, lead other people. And so I think you see examples every single day of people who are leaders in some regard. And so you are taking in information from those examples, making your own opinions about whether or not you think that is good leadership or bad leadership. You go to work, you're in school, you're in teachers, so you're surrounded by people who are leading every single day, and you're taking all that information in. And so that helps form your values. It helps form your opinions about how leaders should or shouldn't show up, that then informs the way that you show up. And so I think it really is an experience or a lifetime of experiences that help shape the way that a person behaves in certain situations. And so I think you can take somebody and teach them better ways. Like that's what an entire point of our company is, to teach people a better way to be leaders and show up.
But aren't there those that are just better at it? Like aren't there those that like they just lead because that's who they are? They have this courage, to be at the front. Again, good, bad, or otherwise. We're going to talk about that. But aren't there those that we would say like, wow, that person maybe didn't have to practice that they just were born that way, to like be in front of an audience, to be in front of a group of people. Like, I mean, we love to talk about this, but like Barack Obama was one of those that like he was one of those people for us that he had this innate quality where he was just able to have conversations, to maybe find those diverse perspectives and understand somebody else's perspective, but to take that and to do something with it with this sense of ease that, sure, he got better over time, but like that's something that he started with, I think.
I mean, I'm not going to say Barack Obama's a bad leader because we all know that like he is my
Sure.
person. And so I can't argue with that, right? Like I think he is an exception. He's an incredible leader. I do think he is practiced, right? Like and to your point, like he did get better over time because he was learning, right? And he was experiencing things and getting better. I think he's the exception, but I think your average person, while they may have more confidence or while they may have some, innate skills, I think to truly lead people in a way that is impactful, takes practice and takes learning and takes understanding of what you're doing so you can be intentional about that versus just happenstance of, finding yourself or your team or your organization wherever, you may lead them down a path. Like I think learning it helps you get down on a path more strategically and intentionally and quickly.
I'll use Michael Jordan as an example for this. I think this is a really good example. Michael Jordan led by how he played. He led because he was the best competitor on the floor at all times. But his team didn't start winning championships until he learned how to lead his teammates and act as a team rather than an individual. He had scoring titles and all of that leading through the late 80s when he went into the NBA. But it wasn't until he really made the pivot to say, cool, I have a team now. I'm going to focus on how to bring my team members in. And frankly, it was Phil Jackson's triangle offense that allowed him to be able to do that. That's a whole other side. I could have a whole other debate on the triangle offense. But it was the opportunity to then say like, okay, I don't have to be the star, but I have to figure out how to lead using my innate drive that I have to win, and translate that over to a system that works, and translate that over into something. So he had to be something else for the team at that point in order for them to win the championships that they won.
Yeah, it only gets you so far.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is recognizing that it's only going to get you so far, but if you really want to be great, there's more to it than just relying on natural ability. So
then maybe it's the application of natural ability in the practice of learning how to be a courageous leader. Sure, you got to use what you got. But if you ain't got nothing, you better go learn. Okay, that works. So it sounds like there is an element then of courage being learned over practice, but also that we should be using our innate abilities where relevant, our strengths, if you will, in the sense of finding that courage in those moments. Yeah, I agree. Great. Well, I mean, what do you think, dear listener? One of the things that we want to try to do with this is we want to hear your opinion on this. So we're going to post these podcasts on our socials. Hit us up on our socials. So we're on LinkedIn and we're on Instagram. Both of them are going to have space for you to share what you think about our Flashpoint. Is Mike right? Is Kristen right? Did we do it well? All of that fun stuff. But this Flashpoint debate, it really is meant to start generating some conversation around what courage looks like and how do we find courage in those moments. Is it something that we have to practice, or is it something that's just going to come forth from who you are? And so that's going to come out when we get the podcast out. And so if you're listening to this, you can comment on our socials. We want to hear from you, obviously. So share your thoughts on our posts, or just hit us up with the hashtag, the agency sessions. That's going to be our running tag throughout all of these sessions over the course of this series. But we want to hear from you and get your thoughts on courage. Okay, Kristen, final thoughts on courage for today. If you're going to leave everybody with one thing as they walk away from this, what's that part?
Oh, that's a great question. I think courage truly is the underpinning to leadership, and understanding what courage looks like for you externally in your actions and what you're doing, I think is really important. But I think more important is understanding what courage looks like internally for you, in who you are and who you're being, and how you can reconcile those internal fears and anxieties to help you show up as your most courageous self in these critical moments. I think that's really where the work is, and where people can make some gains. And so if they take anything away, yes, courageous actions are really important, but how can you be more courageous today and tomorrow in who you are and how you're showing up internally? I think that's a good question for everybody asked.
Yeah. I mean, my takeaway from this is that, it is the practice. You're going to have to practice. So, recognize where those emotions pop up, that maybe you don't want to be courageous. And if you want to be a courageous leader, say, nope, that's not how I'm going to show up today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to practice, and I'm going to learn from it. And it's the grace to be able to say, I may not be doing this perfectly at this moment, but I'm going to learn from this and overcome that emotional blocker, if you will. That for me is the big thing, because that's the action you can take today. Do that today, do that tomorrow. Whenever your next hard decision comes up, you can do that.
You can do it at home. You can do it at work. There are plenty of places where you can show up as your most courageous self starting today. I love that you made it actionable for right now.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go home and probably have a hard conversation with my kids at some point tonight. So I'm going to have to choose courage rather than letting them have the second dessert instead of that. So
I'll pray for you.
Right. Yeah, there you go. So that's going to wrap us up for today. Stay tuned for the next session in the series, where we're going to talk about courageous leadership and its relationship to authoritarianism. Spicy stuff. Keep an eye out on our socials for ways to engage. And if you're interested in hosting Kristen to come speak in your organization, you can always find us on our website. Catch you in the next session, and we hope you find a way to lead courageously in your next moment that matters. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Agency Initiative Podcast. To take the first steps into your journey, or to dive deeper into what agency means in your life, check out www.agency-initiative.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Agency Initiative and on LinkedIn at our company page. If you're interested in working with us or joining us on this podcast, we want to hear from you. Send us a note at our contact page at www.agency-initiative.com/contact.